As a comedian, Julie Gale is used to seeing the funny side of things, but when it comes to the modern practice of sexing up childhood, she's definitely not laughing. Padded bras for preschoolers, G-strings for 9-year-olds, pole dancing kits for kids. Raunch culture is everywhere, and has this mother of two saying enough is enough?
Well, like most parents, Julie would like to see her kids enjoy a happy, carefree childhood. She's calling on other parents to get behind her cause, and she joins 9am along with parenting educator Michael Gross to look at how parents can get involved. Good morning to you both.
Morning.
Good morning.
Wait, when we talk of sexualization of children, what do we mean exactly?
Well, we mean what happens to them when they're exposed to sexualised imagery. For example, in billboards, young girls' magazines, the fact that kids are exposed to pornography on a daily basis, for example, in newsagents, supermarkets, corner stores, 7-Elevens. You know, there are magazines that are not under the counter anymore like they used to be, not behind paper bags, but there. And, you know, a lot of research shows that kids who are exposed to pornographic images really develop distorted views on sexuality.
Yeah, it's not just like the TV, like, you know, people say, well, don't turn on the music channels if you think your kids are going to be easily influenced. But you're right, it's in our face. We can't avoid it.
It is in our face, and billboards around town say things like, want longer-lasting sex, stronger, longer, donga, you know, sex for life. I mean, it's pretty extreme. You know, it's okay that there's medication for male sexual dysfunction, but do our kids really need to be asking questions about this before they've even, you know, had a chance to develop information about normal functioning sexuality?
Exactly, and there's also the sexualisation which is aimed at younger youth and
clothing,
younger.
for example, too.
What could possibly be the point of that?
Well, my cynical point of view is that it's profit. You know, our children are commodities these days, and the tween market, kids between the ages of 8 and 12 alone are worth over $4 billion to the Australian economy. So that's quite extraordinary. And, you know, I don't think that our kids' welfare is really in the forefront of advertisers and marketers' minds.
What are the current regulations?
Well, we have a self-regulation industry, so that means that they're looking, it's like the wolf in charge of the sheep as far as I'm concerned. I don't have a lot of confidence that they're really doing the right thing by our kids. And it's a reactionary system, so that billboards are not screened or vetted before they go out in the public arena. Young girls' magazines are not regulated. So they rely on the public to make a complaint. Now, most people that I speak to feel very powerless to make a difference. Most people don't know how to complain or where to complain to.
Yes.
And that's why we call for people to register their names onto the Kids Free to Be Kids website, so that we can make sure that their voice does count, and that we collect a body of numbers to show the relevant industry that they're not reflecting prevailing community standards.
I want to talk to you some more about that in 1 second, but Michael, what sort of effect do these images have on young kids, particularly young women?
Yeah, look, I guess it's also the stage and age when this is really happening with kids. We sort of talk about childhood, and really it's a stage of life we know as latency, which is prior to adolescence. And it's a time when they're trying to work out who they are, and that's the job of latency. And it's that sort of boy germs, girl germs sort of time of life, which is very gender neutral. And they're on a little bit of a journey at that stage to work out who they are. And very confusing when the sexual images are thrown their way, and they're not really ready for that psychologically.
It would seem to me that it's actually hurrying adolescence, isn't it?
It is. It is. We have a thing called adolescent creep now, which they're staying adolescents longer, but they're also moving into adolescence earlier in a physical sense. And what Julie's talking about is also they're being dragged out of their childhood, kicking and screaming, into adolescence in a social sense earlier than they really want to. And a lot of pressure on kids, actually. There's a hell of a lot of pressure on kids, and I'm seeing that.
Are there signs that parents can look for?
Yeah, I think sometimes that sign is actually what I call pester power, when kids actually are pestering their parents. And pester power is alive and well and living in Australian homes at the moment, very much.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm actually seeing sometimes kids have two faces. There's the public face and the private face. And that public face sometimes is when a child's out with his friends, and it's very much, I want to be older than I am. And there's a private face, and that private face is sometimes kids behind closed doors are very much little kids. Sort of they're torn between the two. And that's traditionally what we know is what happens to kids in puberty when they're sort of moving. There's a battle between the child and the emergent teen inside. and that's always been the way of it. However, what we're seeing now is that's starting to happen earlier and earlier because of this sort of stuff, I believe.
Julie, clearly you touched on it before, regulation. There needs to be greater regulation. There needs to be a guideline. I mean, how do we know, where is the guideline between what is sort of acceptable sexual... there is no acceptable sexualisation.
It's a tricky one. There is no provision in the Code of Ethics set down by the Australian National Advertisers at this point for the impact of the sexualisation of kids, nor for the impact on the sexual objectification of women, or men for that matter, and the impact of that on growing children. So there is no provision, so that when people do complain at the moment, they can't tick the boxes, so they dismiss the complaints.
But nor can advertisers too, can they?
Well,
I mean,
they have a
when
loose...
is it okay and when is it not okay?
They have a loose code of ethics that they must adhere to, but it's known now that the envelope is being pushed and pushed and pushed, and so, you know, the reins need to be pulled in. The advertisers and marketers absolutely need to understand the impacts, which are things like an increase in young people of anxiety, depression, eating disorders, sexual experimentation at a very young age now, and the implications of that, an increase in sexually transmitted infections in teenagers. You know, you've really got your head in the sand if you think that this is not happening.
Julie, and I'm wondering, it's almost in some ways like the new face of, or the modern face of feminism seems to be sexual independence and...
Oh, there's a very big message now that sex is empowerment. You know, you get that from girl groups like the Pussycat Dolls. You get it everywhere, and you know,
shows like Sex and the City and...
Yes,
you know.
And I think it's a very limited view of young people trying to develop a whole, well-rounded and balanced view of themselves.